All across America and around the world, this is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio an Air Force veteran, Cody Husemann, who's going to tell us a little bit about how a nice person like her ended up in the Air Force. Cody, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, let me set this up a little bit. As I mentioned at the outset, you did 4 years in the United States Air Force. You deployed 4 times. You spent time in Iraq. We'll talk about all of that. There's also an interesting story that afterwards you got out, became a registered nurse, went to school for that, and then picked up your master's in nursing. You did some professional employment with the VA hospital. We'll talk a little bit about that, but now you're and you became an oncology nurse, and now you're an infusion expert. I don't even know what infusion is. We'll get to that too, but I want to put in context sort of life started in the Air Force, but man, it's really been a growth curve since then. But let's go back to that, Cody. How did a nice girl like you end up in the Air Force?
It's a very interesting story and a unique one, and everybody kind of laughs on, the trajectory of my path. But it started, my dad was a very strict man and really encouraged myself and my siblings to, go to college or the military. And he wasn't military, but my grandfather was, his father. And he knew that it was good for structure and establishing, a kind of a stepping stone, and if you will, into the big world. And oddly enough, I got out of high school. I guess it's not odd, but I got out of high school and got a little bit more freedom. And I found out that was really fun. So my dad actually picked me up one day and was like, and because I was trying to take some courses and for college, and he's like, man, you need the military and Jesus in your life. And I had always thought about going. 9/11 happened, and it was just at the time, going through that period of time in school, I was like, I didn't know what I want to do. I think that's very common. Most young individuals have no idea what they're going to do, and those that do are very blessed to have an idea. But so anyway, I knew that I also recognized that I needed some structure and needed to find a direction, and so I did. I joined, but when I joined, I think that my dad was hoping that I would have more of a paper pusher kind of stateside type of job, and the recruiter was talking to me about a lot of different opportunities. And so I got more into a role that set me up with a Special Operations Squadron, the 4th SOS, down at Hurlburt Field, doing logistics and ComSec, so communication security. And I was deployed less than a year after joining. The first deployment was in Kuwait. A lot of veterans might laugh and say that's the Hilton, because it was at Ali Salim. And it was very nice.
Now we've just lost all our Marine listeners, Cody, because they're going, Air Force is the country club, and then Kuwait. Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Chair Force and then Kuwait. So you're getting your chai lattes and sneaking into the Army side to get the good chow down at the bottom, and in hard billets, not in a tent. So I get it. I'm here for it. But shortly after that time of getting there, and I will tell you an interesting story about like going there. I think the bag drag process, other vets will, during that time frame was much different than what I hear it is now. It takes a couple days, and you finally get to your location, and lo and behold, the only female in the entire unit, and they lost my bag. So that was fun to find out. And then getting off in Kuwait at the airport there, and then getting on a bus that a type of bus that they take you to Ali. And I'll never forget, here I am, like I've gone through all the training, I'm, know what I'm going to do, but it didn't quite click with me until right at this moment where the bus driver gets on and he's like, all right, you know the drill. And a lot of the guys that I was with had previously gone, several times, and it was nothing to them. So they get on, they're putting their headphones on, they're getting ready to crash out. And the bus driver's like, all right, you know the drill, no headphones, don't fall asleep, don't open the curtains. If this guy gets shot, then you go over here. And I'm just like sitting there like, what? Like I'm trying to look behind like the curtain, and, next thing you know, we take off and we're, flying through the desert, if you will. And, convoys racing ahead and stopping at intersections. And then that was kind of like my, oh crap, moment. Like, what did I just get myself into? But that was probably the realest moment there, eye opener. And then, of course, getting there and getting involved. But during that time, this has a point, it leads to my story. But during that time, the vets that were there could also understand that we had like one phone in a tent and a calling card, which was very challenging, because then you spend 5 minutes to get the calling card information, you call home to family, and then there's a 30-second delay and everybody's just really frustrated and you're like, I'm done. But during that first deployment, we were told to, let your folks know or whomever know that you're not gonna be able to talk for a little bit. And so I did. And, I think this was in 2004. It seems like, the other day, but it was 20 plus years ago now. But that was when they were moving our gunships to Iraq. So we were moving from Ali into Iraq and Camp Anaconda and Balad. And, my dad tells me this story. He's like, it was so bizarre because, you told me you weren't going to be able to talk. And next thing we know, CNN had leaked that we had moved and transitioned into Iraq. And then, then everything kind of got really even more real at that point, and things got a little bit wild for a little bit. But during that deployment, we were wrapping up. And I say deployment, and this is also where the Army guys and the Marine guys are going to laugh and make fun of me. When you're on the base and flying in the air, they're like, that's not a deployment. When your head's in the dirt and you're door kicking, that's a deployment. So I will give them that for sure. I did have a tent in Balad, and I was the only female in there, so that was nice. But anyway, towards the end of it, we were going to be stuck waiting on the rotator for about another month or so. And our pilot was like, hey, there's a medevac flight coming in, going to Ramstein. We're going to try to see if we can, get on this flight. And so we did. And here I am, this 19-year-old selfish kid, standing on the flight line and just pumped about getting out of Iraq in general and going to get a shower and a good meal and a beer. You only got to be 19 to drink a beer in Germany at the time. So all these selfish thoughts are going through my mind. And then I describe it as like my most humbling moment still to date of my entire life, where it started to resonate with me what it was I was actually doing. I was going on a med evacuation flight, and bus after bus after bus of wounded soldiers started rolling in, and it was I think it wasn't a C-5, I think C-17 probably, but very large aircraft. And you're sitting on the side seats, and not even a couple feet away from my knees were soldiers that were stacked on stretchers about 3 high from back to front that were really messed up. And then on the other side, from back to front, were guys that were on some life support machines, and back to front. And it was probably the most quiet and intense flights that I'd ever been on and witnessed. But in that moment is really where my whole life changed, because the 9-hour flight from where we were at to Ramstein, I watched these nurses race around and try to, save lives and do the things that they did. And I was just like, man, that's so cool. Like, I want to do that. Like, that's something I think I could do. And that's really what led me into the path. I mean, I finished my enlistment at, the 4 years, and then I got out and went to nursing school. And that's really what opened me up, and how I got in from going in special ops and the Air Force to now doing what I do.
Well, that is really a crystallized moment in your memory, in your psyche about like this. That gave you your future mission of, hey, I got to get my education. As I mentioned earlier, you picked up a BSN RN from University of West Florida. You went on to even more education to pick up your master's in nursing from Walden University in 2021, and have had this great healthcare nursing career from then. But where else did you? So you went to Iraq. That's the first time. You said you went. You had 4 deployments. What happened on the other 3? Where were you at?
It was Balad. We stayed in Balad, and that was where the gunships were out of. Now the U model has since retired. It was an older plane, but a lot of the times, for those that have, I mean, a lot of the vets have flown on C-130s, but definitely on the U model, I felt you never felt quite like you were going to actually even get off the ground. It was just like a big fat, do down the runway. And
how will that thing ever fly, right?
Right. And I was fortunate enough, my last year actually started to transition. We were the first SOW. So basically we got the CV-22, the Osprey, the rotor wing aircraft from the Marines. We were the first to get them. And for those that have any familiarity with it, might agree, might not, but it is a terrifying aircraft to me personally, and flew on it quite a bit. We were initial cadre, so we were doing a lot of the initial training missions. And actually at a Marine base, we were in North Carolina doing some stuff out there. And then we went to Vegas, did some red flag stuff. And then we were going to Alaska. So they were just doing a bunch of testing for it. Pretty terrifying aircraft, I will say, at least for me personally. Mechanically, there was a lot of stuff that had happened.
Had a lot of problems, certainly at the startup of it. So when you got out of after 4 years, when you went in, and maybe this was part of Dad's thing, you go in for a little bit. Did you know going in, this is a one tour, one contract for me, and then I'm out, and I'm going to go get education, or how did the process work for you to say, okay, it's time to move to the next level? Transitioning is hard for people.
It is. And, at least at that time, the transition out of the military is also bizarre. I think that at that time, there definitely could have been some more work. You go from being told what to do, when to do it, how to do it for so long. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, good luck. And then you're back in the civilian world. And I think one of the biggest shockers for me wasn't necessarily figuring out what I was going to do, which I know a lot of my friends did struggle with that when they got out. Mine was like smacked me in the face and was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I had it, driven to go that route. But it was also losing that camaraderie with people. Like even in the industry now, it's so much different, and that was one of the greatest things that I missed, was the camaraderie and the connection with the people that you serve with, and so that was the biggest transition, I think, initially for me.
But as you said, you had a purpose. You
I
knew what
did,
you
yeah.
wanted to go do, and I think when we've talked to so many veterans transitioning over 20 years of doing this, and for some it takes years to find that purpose. They're really lost for a long time. Um, but it gave you a certain amount of direction and drive and knew what you wanted to accomplish at the end. But nursing wasn't in your thought pattern as a high school graduate, a 19-year-old taking some college courses, if I
Not even
understand.
close. Not
Yeah.
even, never. And I don't have any family members that were in healthcare. It wasn't anything. It was just watching that and watching what happened on that aircraft was like, that's it. But it's interestingly enough, so I get out, I go, to my program. It was an accelerated program, pretty intense. And I had this one track vision that I'm going to be a flight nurse. I'm going to be a flight nurse. I'm going to be a flight nurse. And then, like, my final semester, Professor Bennett sits me down. She's like, I got to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I hear your path and what you're wanting to do. And I think that's, a remarkable path to go. But she said, I watched you on your peds rotation, pediatric with kids and cancer unit. And she's like, and you sucked. And I was like, yeah, I did. I did suck. I was like, I don't deal well with kids suffering and, injury. And she's like, well, Cody, she's like, don't you think that kids have to be life lighted? And like my whole world was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do now? Like, I have no idea what my purpose is. And, and anyway, graduated, still like, I did this, so I'm going to do it, and moved back home to Michigan, where I'm from. And it was really kind of challenging to get a job at that time, oddly enough, given that the need for nurses, but they wanted people to have experience. And so it's hard to get experience if nobody gives you experience. But fortunately for me, at the Ann Arbor VA hospital, we were lucky enough, me and it was six total bachelor graduate nurses, that they started at nurse residency program. So technically it was like it was 1 year. It was technically like an extra year of schooling, but you were paid. It was a job. And basically you had like a home-based unit. Mine was med surg. And then you would go to every other unit in the hospital, if you will, to get exposure. And you would work under another bachelor certified nurse. And in the final 3 months, your immersion period, anywhere that you were kind of interested in where they had openings, they would, essentially kind of put you in there for training, and then you would apply and interview to hire. Never really had any, set plan on oncology. I've had many family members at that time that had, gone through cancer, but it wasn't a draw. But I fell in love with it the first time I got involved with the outpatient oncology unit. So that's where I ended up in my immersion period, and then interviewed and was hired as a baby nurse, which is pretty intense, to start giving chemo to the veterans. But
Okay, so what's scarier, being a 19 or 20-year-old in Iraq, or being a baby nurse giving cancer drugs to veterans in a VA hospital? Those both sound pretty scary.
They are. And the funny thing about what you just said is that I was asked to speak at my graduation ceremony. And one of the things that I had mentioned is, that I had a child, I had my son, and naturally, and then I said, and I'd also had been, in Iraq, and had made the correlation that I would rather have given birth to twins naturally while running through Iraq than go back through nursing school again. It was absolutely the most challenging thing, way more than anything else that I had done. And, you have human lives in your hands in different, capacities, but it was intense, and learning oncology and watching our vets battle, their health and the system a little bit, kind of watching that, and the wait lists and nurses just being overworked and not having enough resources. That's historically a challenge throughout. But I fell in love, and it was just like that. This is it for me. This is the type of thing I want to do. I knew I always felt called to serve in some way. I just didn't know how. Life just kind of, kept doing its thing.
And that's one of those. Let's stop there for our veteran radio listeners, and we're talking to Air Force veteran Cody Husemann. It's important to realize, and your story realizes that life's a whole bunch of zigzags and not a straight line, and you get that slap the head moment. I want to be a nurse. You get this slap the head moment. Oh my God, this is frightening as hell. I don't have any interest in oncology, cancer treatment. Wow, I really feel I can serve. So there's a whole bunch of life changes that isn't a straight line and wasn't planned out, but that's how life works, doesn't it?
Always, life does. Anytime I make a plan, it always seems to go opposite of that plan. So it's just making the best of that situation and kind of grasping on, to your best idea of what is supposed to happen in that time frame. But it's been a journey. It's definitely been a journey. And even now where I'm at, I never wanted to be a leader, never wanted to be in business necessarily. That wasn't on my mind either. But
Well, let's kind of start there. You then made, because we have another transition. While it's not professional necessarily, or maybe it is, you decided after time in the military, time at the VA hospital, again, both federal systems, you said, maybe it's time to go to the private sector. Again, a transition that people can relate to. Talk to us about that transition for yourself.
Yeah, it wasn't so much as transitioning out of the VA. In fact, I was trying to see about initiation of a hospice program. I obviously, with working in oncology, saw transitions into, palliative care type state and into hospice, and found that it was very powerful and very important. And they, at that time, I'm not sure now, did not have a program. And so I wanted to get into that. So I expanded out and I went into hospice nursing for a couple of years. So I essentially provided hospice care in facilities and at homes all over Southeast Michigan. And to date, I would probably say that was my most favorite out of all the things I've ever done in my life, the most rewarding position. And people are like, man, you're pretty dark. You like hospice and oncology, just like nothing like that. It's such a fulfilling, rewarding experience, and not one where like giving somebody that's misfortune a cheeseburger and taking a picture of myself showing that I'm doing it. Like that's gross to me. It's when people are in, birth and death are some pretty pivotal moments in a life that you'll never forget. And when you can help somebody transition during that time and help their family, because really a lot of hospice care is education and the process and what it looks like versus what you see in the movies. And that was the most rewarding position that I had ever obtained. And so I did that for several years. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of support in that realm either. So I was working 7 days a week and 24-hour shifts on Monday. And my mom was like, I love you, but you got to do something else because I have 2 children. And she was having to come out in the middle of the night. And so transition back into oncology.
Can I stop you there before we get to oncology? Because I think VA now has some pretty good hospice programs, and the concept of community care also expands that. And I had parents go through hospice. I'm a big supporter of the concept. Found it really calming and helpful in a time of crisis. But for those veterans or veteran friends and family members who'd be listening, can you talk a little bit more about hospice and what its role is and how it helps families and those in their last days?
Absolutely. Honestly, I wish that we could change the term hospice. It has a very negative connection for a lot of people, or this is giving up, or this is, for if they come in, they're going to make this happen quicker. And that was absolutely not what hospice was at all. In fact, I don't know, I would kind of skate the line, if you will, legally, to keep people on hospice so they could get some of the services that they needed. They were not quite there to where they were transitioning at that moment, but did need that extra support. And what is something that is unfortunate is when people don't have that hospice care transition to where they're sick and then all of a sudden it's an emergency situation to where they get on board and it's not a smooth transition of care. So really what hospice is just an extra advocate and support person to honor that individual's goals of care and make sure that they're comfortable and, not scared. Death can be a scary thing for a lot of people, and a lot of education on what the body does and what to expect, and really just encouraging connections with the family and the family member or the individual.
It's wonderful care for the patient, and as you say, keep them comfortable. And by that, my term would be keep them out of the pain that they might be experiencing, but also creates this opportunity for final discussions and final I love yous and don't worry, I'll take care of mom, and all of that kind of stuff in a comfortable, caring situation. And I suspect you saw that all the time.
All the time, and really helped with a lot of the misconceptions of hospice care. And a big one is morphine. You're gonna kill my family member if you give them that. And in a lot of the situations, it's really no matter what, the body's shutting down, and the morphine allows people sometimes to get comfortable enough to let go, versus it being the direct cause of an individual's passing. But there's stories, and people hear stories about somebody else's experience, and not all of them are great for everybody. So there can build up this negative idea of what hospice care is, but it is such a powerful thing. And I encourage anybody that is on the fence about it to at least do informationals where they come on and talk about what they offer, and people can sign up one day and then be like, you know what, never mind, I don't want to do this, and they're off immediately. It's not anything like a contract. They're locked in. It's really just an additional support for individuals that are transitioning throughout their care journey.
So you went from hospice nursing back into oncology at a local healthcare system. Better hours, I'm sure. Mom was happy, the kids were happier, and I want to then move, because I don't think many people know what the hell infusion is. So you then got, after a couple of years there, somebody either tapped you on the shoulder or you raised your hand and said, boy, do I have an interesting idea for you. Talk to us about that transition again in your professional career.
Yeah. So the other thing that kept happening in healthcare is that I kept kind of getting promoted, or not, I don't want to say promoted in that way, but kind of assigned or tasked to take a lead on something, or, we want you to oversee this, or we want you to do this because of what I was good at technically. Like I was really good at starting an IV and giving treatment in a safe manner, whatever it might be. And honestly, I saw that was the deficit in healthcare, and a deficit in a lot of the industries, that people get promoted, if you will, for what they're good at technically in their position, but have no idea really how to oversee an operation or oversee other individuals. And, so that can be a challenge. And I didn't want that to happen. So I said, I'm going to at least go back to grad school to make sure that I know how to manage an operation and people. So I did that. And then that transitioned into a larger position in a director role. And what infusion is, I'm director over a cancer infusion site right now. Basically, an infusion is just a medication of any type that, is going to be infused into the body through either a port or an IV. And in a cancer infusion center, our primary patient is a cancer patient, but we also serve chronic illness type patients with MS, rheumatoid arthritis, GI, so on and so forth. And during my time as the cancer director, I was also tasked to be an operational leader for a community outpatient infusion center. And this was not for cancer patients. It was primarily for our chronic care patients. And it was the first that had ever been done in a health system. So there was a lot of learning. And I think that's where the military veteran mindset comes in. It's a dog with a bone. If you don't understand it, like, I'm all in. And in fact, they called me, I don't like this term because it sounds kind of negative, but they call me the bulldog at work. And it's just because of the sense I'm a fierce advocate for people. I've never chased a title or a position because that feels gross to me. And that's never was my intention of even getting into leadership. It was, I want to help people. I want to serve people. I want to make a difference. And um, so I have, and I've invested a lot of my time and energy into volunteer work. I do a lot of volunteering in our communities, and it's rewarding to me. I always think I will feel called to serve no matter what it is I end up doing in life.
Well, I think one of the Air Force core principles is service before self. And I've heard that from a nurse I know. And so I think it's, kind of embedded in your DNA after a while. And there's another thing I like to refer to with my own, Air Force veteran nurse that is a nurse's heart. And you clearly have a nurse's heart. And I think that's something that people recognize. They may not be able to put a word around it, but that's my word around it. Before we close out here, we've talked about how, life hasn't been a straight line. It's a lot of connected dots, but dots maybe not in a straight line. And today's a lot different than it was 20 years ago when Dad said it's college or military, girl. But you probably get asked, particularly as a woman veteran, because there's so few veterans and even fewer female veterans. What do you think about military as a stepping stone along the way?
It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, to be honest. There's, everybody has their own story, but it set me up in life as far as teaching me responsibility and respect and motivation and being determined and going after things. It establishes this core, step, if you will, into transitioning into life. And I don't regret anything that I've ever been a part of. One of the programs that actually how I was connected with your wife was I became a certified mil vet instructor for health systems. And one of the things I actually even learned about my own self during that time is something that is called moral injury, which a lot of veterans have. And even if they don't realize what the fancy term is, they have, because I didn't even realize it, where for a long time I didn't feel worthy of prayer or feel worthy of good things for myself. And I had to do, things for others. And it's correlated from maybe some things that you've done in your life, whether it's military or not. But a part of this program is to teach healthcare providers and individuals that, hey, you look at me and I come in and I say, I have this continuous headache that's going on and all of these things. The doctor might be like, oh, okay, well, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a nurse, blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, drink more water, stop eating crumble, like whatever. And but then they're not asking or screening like, oh, you were, around the burn pits for 4 years and you were doing this. So really this program was to kind of educate, providers in the health system to acknowledge and recognize veterans, not only veterans, but their families, because it does have an association with their overall health and, the care that they're providing. So, I'm sorry, what was
we started on the question of like, would you recommend the military career to a young woman or young man who's thinking, I don't know what I'm doing in life?
I definitely would. I think that, really researching it and looking into it versus going to a recruiter, and not saying anything bad about my recruiter, but they definitely are going to tell you some things. So researching and getting all the information about, what type of job you want in the military. Don't ever go in general. Just, that's my personal opinion. They'll plug you where they need you. But, having a real background. And here's the other thing I didn't really know, other than my recruiter was, kind of talking about the excitement of it. And when you're a young, impressionable person, Okay, sign me up. It's, yeah, it would have been great to have a little bit more information. The other thing I would have recommended is probably I should have started running quite a bit before and maybe learned a little bit about the background of like rank and military, because, basic training and all the training after that, it does become beneficial. But I 100% would recommend it. This world is crazy. We have a lot of crazy things going on. So I understand that the concern about, hey, going in, or if somebody's like, well, would you want your 2 children to go in? And my son has actually mentioned that he wants to go in and do some things. And like, as a mom, I'm like, but at the end of the day, I would be very proud if that was the decision that my kids made. I'm proud of, what I was involved in during the time, regardless of anybody's thought on why we were there. It was a powerful, impactful time in my life. And I encourage anybody that is kind of on the fence, if they don't know what they want to do, to at least don't listen to your buddies, don't listen to the social media and everything else. Like, go and explore and research, talk to a recruiter, but then go back and do your own research. And even if you only do the 4 years, I thought I was going to be a lifer. And again, my path went, I did all the extra duties. I did honor guard for 6 months because I was going to try to make chief and all the things. And, I only did the 4 years, but it served me in such a remarkable way, not only in paying for my education and not having all that debt, but also teaching me how to grow in life and have that ability to serve in a different capacity and, go throughout life and with those types of core values that they instill in you.
Well, we want to thank Cody Husemann to spend a little time with Veterans Radio, Air Force veteran, nurse, and giving us some of her story and pearls of wisdom. As you go through life, it's not straight lines. Take every opportunity you can, because you don't know where it's going to lead. Cody, thanks for talking to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA, can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. We also want to thank our local sponsors. This would include the Charles S. Kettles chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, that's chapter 310, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.